Uh, Good morning, everyone. This is a webinar on the FreeVAL model, which was supported in part by SHRP2-L08 Implementation Assistant Program to the North Carolina Department of Transportation, who in turns have contracted ITRE to develop that procedure. So, before we get started, I would like to just tell you who is going to be presenting. My name is Nagy Rafael. I'm a professor of civil engineering at North Carolina State University at the Department of Civil Construction and Environmental Engineering. I'm also joined here by Dr. Behzad Agdashi, who's a research associate at the Institute for Transportation Research and Education. Both of us have been working on the FreeVAL model for at least a decade, if not a little bit more. And we would like to present to you the latest and we think a much more updated version of the software and what it can do. So let me give you a quick outline of what the workshop will entail. We'll start, of course, with some introductory material, including the purpose of the workshop. I will then myself also talk a little bit about the theory or the methods in the Highway Capacity Manual 6, HCM 6, overview of the freeway facility methods that is implemented in the software. Then my colleague, Dr. Agdashi, will provide a demo of a core method. And what we mean by a core method is basically modeling a single day or a single peak and what are the capability of FreeVAL in modeling various activities that could happen during the day. Then I will take over again and talk a bit about the new reliability chapter in HCM 6. And again, this relates to how we can use the method to determine travel time distribution under a variety of demand, weather, and incident conditions. Dr. Agdashi will follow that with a demonstration of the reliability methods, specifically as it relates not only to identifying problems, but also how to mitigate some of the reliability problems. And finally, he will also spend a bit of time on how we can calibrate and do some at least reasonable validation of the model for specific sites. And then talk a little bit about next step and maybe ongoing research and activities to even improve the model a bit better. So the purpose of this workshop, and hopefully you will find it useful, is how to set up a FreeVAL analysis, including calibration. So the software is available for free for download. And it is important that we provide sufficient support for users to be able to have confidence not only in how to code an analysis, but also how to interpret the results. We will show you how to review an existing or editing a new FreeVAL file. We'll tell you how to interpret results from both a single day analysis, which is what we call the core method, which is explained in chapter 10 of HCM 6, or reliability longer-term analysis, which is also explained in chapter 11. In addition, and I think we will also demo how do we assess the impact of work zones, or the effect of incidents, or the effect of weather condition and special events on non-recurring congestion and what it does typically to a specific peak or a specific day. So before we get started, let me also mention a few things about some of the resources that are available. We invite and we strongly urge everyone to start by visiting the freeval.org website. That's really the repository of a number of versions of FreeVAL. It also includes a user guide for FreeVAL and some training videos, initial training video on how to code a FreeVAL. There may be 4 or 5 of these videos that you can look at, and fairly short to help you get started with the software. So, what is FreeVAL? FreeVAL was actually developed in the late 1990s, and in fact, it was developed initially as an Excel spreadsheet, which was fairly limited in the amount of analysis that it can do. And since then, since the past 20 years or so, it has continuously been improved and expanded since that time. So using some funding from ACM and from SHRP2, we had the opportunity to improve it to the point where we feel it's probably one of the best software for freeway facility analysis. It also happens to be the official computational engine of the HCM. So to perform both segment, facility, and reliability analysis, we account for all type of segment and also for all type of managed lanes. And we'll talk about this in a few minutes, how our managed lanes analyze and how they can be incorporated into a facility analysis. More importantly, and until FreeVAL was implemented, it's the first model of facility that I would say macroscopic facility model that can handle oversaturated condition. It can handle Q formation, Q dissipation over both time and space, subject to some HCM limitation, which we'll also be discussing in a few minutes. So what can FreeVAL do in general? And we'll get to the details in a few minutes. It can do segment and facility level. So anything related to freeway, you want to analyze a basic segment or a weave, you can do that in FreeVAL using a single segment type approach. You could also obviously analyze facility level. One of the things that is important is typically if the facility is way under capacity, analyzing individual segment and facility is pretty much the same. One is just an aggregation of others. Once you come to oversaturation, that cannot be the case. Reliability now gets into looking at multiple sources of congestion, also looking at long-term performance of the facility under a combination of these sources of congestion. Work zones, and here we probably need to distinguish between what I would call long-term work zone, which can be modeled in the calendar, if you will, within FreeVAL as something that is persistent, or can be modeled if they are short-term, a few minutes or a few hours as incidents that could impact the facility, of course, as well as managed lane. A new addition to the version of FreeVAL that we will demonstrate is the ability to implement some ATM strategy, including ramp metering, hard shoulder running, incident management, and traffic diversion. So all of these are strategies that you can implement in FreeVAL and look at its impact both at a single day or at the reliability level. So we talked about FreeVAL. FreeVAL actually, as I said, started back in the 1990s, but we won't go that far back. Since HCM6 was developed back in 2015, there was a FreeVAL version which is called 2015E, E for engine or computational engine. There is a faithful representation of the methods in the HCM. And since then, through a number of projects, we have developed specific version primarily either for federal use or for state use. One of them being FreeVAL WZ, dealing with work zones, funded by our state of North Carolina. FreeVAL DSS, this is the one that resulted in the implementation of several active traffic management. Another FreeVAL version, which should be FreeVAL Plus, I guess, integrate a lot of these original procedure. And the one we will demo today is FreeVAL NC, which was just completed a few months ago, and really incorporates all of the elements that have been studied and investigated and implemented in earlier versions of FreeVAL. Additionally, going back to our website, you can have access to the entire FreeVAL NC user guide. You can invoke that by pressing the F1 key when that software window is selected. And finally, we talked about some YouTube videos, and these YouTube videos can be accessible in a separate NC State website that is indicated on this slide. And as you can see below the pictures, a number of videos, 6 or 7 videos that are targeted to different pieces of FreeVAL that you can go back and analyze. All right, so that concludes session 1. And then we will go back and now talk a little bit about the overview of the HCM core Freeway Facility. So this is mostly a very quick overview. We do encourage you to consult your own manual, mostly in volume 2 for the printed version or the of uninterrupted flow facilities, as well as volume 4, which includes some supplemental material. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, FreeVAL can perform any freeway analysis that is cited in the 6th edition. It also includes, the version we will show you, some additional tools to simplify the input process. One of the things that we heard from the users is, do we really need to enter a 15-minute flow rate for every segment, for every on-ramp, for every off-ramp, for the entry to the facility? So what we have done here is a couple of things. One of them is to allow you to directly input both average daily traffic on the facility, both on the main entry and the ramps, as well as selecting from a variety of hourly volume distribution that you feel are more representative of the facility. That allows you to do that automatically. Within North Carolina, we also have generated something called an online segmentation database that include both modeling or identifying every single freeway segment in North Carolina and identify it as a basic or weave and so on, and extracting those segment type directly from a map database, as well as extracting their demand profile as well. So in fact, that second bullet here combines both segmentation as well as volume data that can be entered literally within minutes without having to worry about the integrity of the coding at this point. So that's an important facility. Right now, the database is populated with NC data, but obviously it can be populated with other states as well. The third item is a facilitated calibration, where we allow the user to upload or download probe data for that same facility and compare the speed data that the model generates against the data from the probe data and adjust the model parameter to enable some improved calibration of the methods. And finally, it allows us to do a work zone analysis, which enable us to test the impact of work zones. So quickly, the material for included in FreeVAL can be found in both volume 2, which are the bolded chapter on top of that blue line. All of this material is included, is implemented in FreeVAL, with the details explained in volume 4 in chapter 25 through 28. So one question here, why do we care about analyzing freeways as facility? One of the reasons we analyze them as facilities is that segment operation is not independent. This happens to be a slide from Interstate 40 in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we do see here an upgrade where trucks have to slow down because of the upgrade, generating a shock wave that begins to push back all the way to nearby segment. So whether it's a grade, whether it's just a bottleneck, whether it's weather, any of these things gonna impact multiple segments, and therefore it doesn't make sense to analyze an individual segment out of relationship with neighboring segment as well. How do we analyze? We actually begin to stitch a number of segment types, and these are fairly common: basic segment, on-ramp segment, off-ramp segment, and weaving segment. We also have something called overlap segment, which could be the case where the distance between on-ramp and off-ramps could be less than 3,000 feet, which is essentially the sum of the ramp influence areas. Now, ACM segment, just to be clear, are different than the traffic message channel or the TMC that are generated with the probe. So we make sure that we also consistently understand that relationship and account for it in our results. How we do segmentation? Many ways. You can start from scratch and just stick in a different segment as you used to do in the old days. Or right now we can have an auto segmentation wizard. Even if you don't have the database, you can go to a Google map and click on the different segment, and FreeVAL will recognize those and will actually generate the facility without having the need for a database. If you do have a database, then obviously that will do that by itself. In addition, of course, if you want to look for support, HCM Chapter 10 gives you very good definition on how to split the freeway into HCM segment if you do not use those other tools or utilities. Managed lanes, these were also implemented as a NCHRP funded work that allowed us to generate speed flow relationship on managed lane segments. What we did find in this research was that the operation of managed lanes depended really on two things: whether you did have a single or multiple lane in the managed lane, single lane not enabling obviously passing, and the method by which managed lane and general purpose lanes were separated, either using some paint or buffer, in which case there was some influence of what's going on with the managed lane based on what's going on in the general purpose lane. When you did have a barrier, that influence diminished significantly. Other details we propose or we recommend that you analyze freeways up to 10 to 15 miles. The reason here is we're analyzing things in 15-minute interval, and we want to make sure that you don't have a very long facility, by which time the demand may have changed during the course of vehicle traveling the facility. We do take care of oversaturated condition, we propagate the queue, and we could actually run up to 96 15-minute period or 24-hour operation looking at what happens over the entire day. So basically, what we want to do here is also show some additional capability. We model all active bottlenecks, and the FreeVAL will identify the bottlenecks. We'll also highlight hidden mainline bottlenecks, those who would reappear if you take care of an active bottleneck. A downstream hidden bottleneck may appear. We allow you to change demand and capacity, which is important as well, because by allowing a change in capacity, we can model the effect of incident, weather, and work zone within the facility. Way back then, we actually did validation against some field data and microscopic simulation model at the time. I've listed here a paper that basically show the validation result based on a number of oversaturated facility back in 2000, sorry. Okay. Now, limitations. Right now, the methods in the HCM do not account for spillback onto the freeway main line due to off-ramp congestion. My understanding is there is a current NCHRP work that is addressing the same problem, and we trust that once that methodology is completed and approved by the HCM committee, that eventually it will find its way into FreeVAL. The other thing also is the ability of having multiple overlapping queues with high demand to capacity ratio. The model works very well if you have multiple bottlenecks that do not interact. It's less reliable when they do interact. Again, there is an expectation of an NCHRP, upcoming NCHRP 396A that will really focus on oversaturated condition on freeway facility. And obviously, it requires some manipulation of demand capacity. Very quick illustration of the methods. This is a freeway facility that has about 7 sections, if you count the distance between the on-ramp and off-ramps, and generates into 11 HCM segments. This is the kind of data that you need both for implementing the freeway facility method as well as input required for FreeVAL. Quickly, some outputs. And what you see here are 3 different outputs. The first one, and just to let you know, on the going from left to right are the different segments of the facility. Top to bottom are the different 15-time period. What you would see on the top is demand to capacity ratio. The red segments are overcapacity. We have a demand to capacity ratio of 1.1. The next one gives you the volume served, and the volume served can never exceed capacity. Again, that shows us where the volume served are equal to capacity. And finally, you could see on the very bottom one, the speed distribution by segment and time period. And it's clear here that we do have an active bottleneck on segment 8, which happens to be an on-ramp segment. Finally, this is, of course, with the HCM, we define 2 levels of service, one based on density, and you could see here upstream of segment 8, we do have a high density queue on segments 6 and 7, and also based on demand to capacity ratio, we can see segment 8 to 11 are operating at levels of service F as well. All right, so that completes the first presentation related to the HCM method itself. And Dr. Agdarshi now will provide a demonstration of how we do a single day or core method.
Thank you, Nagy. So what we have here for next 15 minutes is the demo of the core method within FreeVAL. But before I dive into FreeVAL, I have a couple of bullets that I want to go over them. As Nagy mentioned, you can go to freeval.org to access to the latest version of FreeVAL. Just be cautious that when you download, we put FreeVAL on the cloud in a zip file basically, and once you download it, you need to extract it. You cannot go into the zip file and try to execute FreeVAL. It won't work that way. Once you unzip it, then you can click on the run FreeVAL file and application starts working. What I've prepared for this section is that in order to demo the tool, I want to go over an example, I-540 westbound facility, North Carolina, that I'm going to model it and basically model demand and geometry, all those information. I'm going to primarily rely on the online segmentation database to pull the data while I'm highlighting where how we can model it and the places that we don't have access to the online segmentation database. A work zone will be modeled and its impact will be quantified. So FreeVAL is developed in Java. So basically older versions of FreeVAL required for you to install Java before being able to execute that. But the latest version of FreeVAL, which is FreeVAL NC, really doesn't need to access to JRE or Java runtime environment for its execution. The whole package is wrapped up around an executable file where once you download it, the zip file, you extract it, by double clicking on this file, run FreeVAL, you should be able to, without any problem, invoke the tool. So I just double clicked on the run FreeVAL file, and this is the FreeVAL screen that we are seeing now. And I'm going to go ahead and start out with creating a new project by going into project menu, clicking on the new project. And I will face with a pop-up window that asks me, how do I want to define my facility? The options that I have is to go with segmentation database, which currently has all North Carolina freeways, interstate and non-interstate freeways coded into that. If the freeway that we want to model is not within the online segmentation database, we can go with the second option, which is the map-based segmentation, which will invoke a Google map, and by clicking into gore points, it will go into the auto segmentation process and come up with the segmentation needed. Or if that's not the case, for example, we want to work on top of a facility that we want to build, so it's not out there, we don't have access to its data yet, we can go with a blank template which opens FreeVAL and allows the user to define segments per HCM guidance. So for this example, in order to save time, I want to go with segmentation database. So I'm going to click on the segmentation database. And the next window that we are seeing is actually a web page that is pulled on this screen. And we can access it through freeval.org and see the same window and download the FreeVAL, basically the FreeVAL data, and import it here. But I just want to, in this example, I wanted to go and access it from FreeVAL. So what we can see here is that first we need to determine which date of the database that we want to pull the query. Right now it's only May 2019, but this database will include updates after new freeways comes on, after work zones change configuration, after AADTs changes by every year. So we need to pay attention to the year that we are selecting. So as I mentioned, I want to go with I-540 interstate. I want to model westbound, starting from milepost around 16 to 7. And by clicking that, you can see that it shows where on the map it falls. It's going to be 15 segments, about 9-mile length. And by clicking on the download, basically it pulls all the information into FreeVAL and takes us to the next step to define the spatial temporal boundary of the analysis. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pick from our temporal limits of this analysis to be from 6 a.m. to noon. We can go with 10 a.m. This facility experiences AM peak, so I want to make sure that I am capturing that. By setting my temporal limits, then FreeVAL asks, how do I want to divide AADTs pulled from segmentation database into different 15-minute analysis periods. I can either go with default distribution that FreeVAL proposes, but since I know that this facility has access to one of the sensors that we have used in order to compute this default distribution, I want to go ahead and pull hourly distribution of demand off of a local sensor, which is in Wake County, I-540 westbound, close to Leesville Road, which is within the boundary that we want to analyze, and just capture that demand distribution and put it in FreeVAL. So by clicking OK, FreeVAL's main window is open and pretty much analysis is set up. So all geometric information, all demand information, everything is set up. And as you can see here we are seeing a graphical representation of the facility that consists of 15 segments. And then at the bottom, we see a big detailed input that is already populated with all the information that is brought from segmentation database as well as HCM defaults. Here on top of the graph, we see a controller that we can go into different time periods. As you can see, we have 16 15-minute analysis periods. Right on the second one, starting from 6:15 to 6:30. I can go forward with this timeline bar, and then as you can see, in about 7:30, 7:15, we see that some segments they're experiencing level of service F, which is an indication of the queuing that is happening. As you can see here, our segment number 10 acts as a bottleneck and creates this queuing here. So this is one way of looking into how our facility works. The other way is to look into our heat maps. Basically, that we can take a look at different MOEs that we can select from the bottom menu. By default, it shows a speed, and as you can see here in this table, it shows how our queuing basically forms starting at about 7 a.m. It reaches its maximum queue at about 8 a.m. and the queue vanishes, clears at about 9 a.m. So with that said, also FreeVAL includes some summary sort of information along with the heat map and detailed input and output that we have, and they are located into the last two tabs on the main screen that shows how this facility works in terms of different MOEs that you can see in this table on every 15-minute operation, as well as how this facility works in terms of as an aggregated, sort of performance measures on all 4 hours, 16 analysis period for every segment. So how every segment basically is operating in regard with different MOEs. So I want to go back into the main screen, and as I mentioned, I pulled all the information here from online segmentation database. But if you had to change some of these inputs, all of them they're editable. But if you want, let's assume that you have created your facility either from Google Maps auto segmentation, or you have just modeled it with HCM guidance using blank template, and you want to enter demand. And demand is the biggest input after geometry that you need to take care of it. FreeVAL comes up with a wizard, which is called a demand wizard, basically, that by clicking to edit demands, that it marks that wizard. And basically in this wizard, we can go into every segment, and as you can see, we can select each segment, and then it says what AADT is used. This 15,000, as you can see here on this screen, is coming from a segmentation database. I can alter it, and then of course for each individual segment I can specify what type of hourly distribution used. At the beginning of this analysis, we used we indicated a sensor located on the facility to be used for all hourly distributions, but we can alter it by type of segments or location of segments, every off-ramp, every on-ramp, to what to use. And then by saving all this information, applying them, FreeVAL will take those and implement it. So before I wrap up this demo for core analysis, I want to also show a feature that FreeVAL has. It's called scenario analysis, which enables the user to define a scenario for a single day type of analysis and model some sort of non-recurring source of congestion. I'm gonna create a scenario, and for my scenario, I want to go ahead and model a work zone. I can model a severe weather event, I can model incident and other things, but I'm gonna just limit myself here for a work zone. So by creating the scenario, I want to add a work zone for my scenario that's gonna last for, let's say, the entire study period, which gonna affect, let's say, from segment 10 to 13, and that's gonna be just a shoulder closure. So per HCM, shoulder closure will have impact. A work zone that is close to the shoulder will has some impacts on the speed as well as capacity. Here, FreeVAL offers more details. I'm gonna skip over them and let HCM defaults govern all the configuration. By going back into the FreeVAL's main window, then we can see that on the left side that shows the project components, we can see that we have one work zone scenario. We can hop into the second to the results contour tab, and as you can see, by moving from the core, which is called SID with no work zone case, and by basically moving between these two, you can see that how much bigger queuing is developed by imposing this work zone. So this work zone, of course, creates a bigger queue. One of the use cases of FreeVAL in terms of planning, specifically for work zone, is that, okay, so we want to quantify how much impact this work zone imposes into our operation of our facility. And then one of the good ways to go is to look into user delay cost. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to go into the compare tab in the FreeVAL's main window and add both no work zone and work zone cases to this compare tab. So it compares how these two are operating in terms of different MOEs. And in the last row, it shows that by default, if it's an average day, there's going to be about a 50K user delay cost incurred only by recurring congestion in this facility, while by having that work zone which closes shoulder, it creates more queue, it goes up to 121. So basically it's about $70,000 worth of user delay cost that is imposed daily by such a work zone. So with that said, I want to go back into our presentation, next section of the presentation, which Dr. Rockwell will take it over.
Okay, thank you, Behzad. Hopefully, again, this between what you heard from Behzad and the different sources of support in the website, you ought to be able to begin to execute the core method. And we do recommend, before you run into reliability, is to get comfortable with the modeling of the single day, the peak hours, and also looking at how we can incorporate some of those ATM as well as impacts of work zones, incidents, and weather. So I will be talking now about HCM reliability. And so, well, I guess the question here, in the past, we always did the average day. And one of the good questions is, why do we continue to analyze, and I should say, only the average day? In reality, there is no such thing as the average day. Every day is very different than the next. So on the left side, you can see here in the past, we didn't care. We said we'll just take a sunny Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and do all kind of analysis and design on the basis of what we see on the average day. From the perspective of the user, what they experience, at least in terms of travel time, is what you see on the right-hand side. And what you see on the right-hand side are for the same origin destination, for the same departure time, lots of variability in travel time. In fact, what the user remembers are not the good days. They usually remember the days where things are not too good. And therefore, at least from a reliability perspective, it is important to characterize that variability in travel time or the distribution of travel time. And that distribution really enable us to characterize what reliability is. So, sources of reliability in the HCM, there are many of these. Some have to do with special event, demand surges, changes in demand for specific days or specific time. A state fair could be an example. A sporting event could be an example. Obviously, work zone or impact reliability significantly, whether mostly for longer term work zones that basically impact capacity over an extended period and could not only impact capacity but could also result in demand changes. And that's really one of the more challenging pieces here. In addition, we could have situation of incident, which Bizat talked about. Incident could include shoulder closure, could include multiple lane closure, could include a number of these based on the severity of the incident. And of course, weather events that tend to be localized in nature. And what we model here are the ability to extract weather data for a number of metropolitan area in the US. So the sources, traffic demand, cyclical variation, either by time of day, by day of week, by month of year. So what Bizat talked about in the database, all of these are reflected in the database. Non-recurring, we talked about incidents. We talked about adverse weather condition or severe weather condition, work zones, and demand surges. Just like everything in the HCM, we're allowing demand to vary between 15-minute analysis periods. Okay? So think of reliability as the third dimension. Typically, what we talked about so far is a single day or a single card in the graphic that you see on the screen. What Bizat just showed you was a typical bottleneck within the spatial and time dimension for a single day here over a 3-hour period. Now, what we're modeling is not a single scenario, but multiple scenarios. And these scenarios have variations in demand, in incident, in weather, and in special events. So this required us within the method in HCM to do something called the scenario generation. We needed to generate scenario that included all of these sources of variability within each 15-minute period. So you can see here the elements that are being varied are incidents, are demand, are weather, and work zones. When we talk about a seed file, the seed file actually, you can think of it as your average day. That's an average day that has none of these events associated with it, except, of course, maybe the average demand as well. So the method that is involved in the HCM does not require a tremendous amount of scenario. The original work with SHRP2-L08 had to generate literally thousands of scenarios. We have adjusted that method to target scenarios that are very realistic and gives you a good sense of reliability without the need for extensive number of scenarios. It uses both stochastic and deterministic method depending on what is being modeled here. Now, what's important here when it comes to the replication of scenarios, we basically take every month, and this is kind of the typical way, we take every month having 5 weekdays, so we model Monday through Friday. Each weekdays is replicated 4 times, so basically every month we model about 20 weekdays. So if you're doing a full year analysis of weekdays, that's 20 times 12, that's the 240 scenario that we analyze. If you're analyzing lower number of days, a season, in winter, for example, then we do recommend that you can increase the number of replication to give you the variety of things that you can see within a confined period. So reliability reporting period is really the scope, the temporal scope of the analysis, and typically it would be 1 year. So this is what we call it a time-space kind of diagram here, showing how incidents and weather are modeled within HCM6. Again, on the left to right, you see segment, top to bottom, you see time period. We have a rain event that lasts for about 45 minutes. If weather events are assumed to occur through the entire facilities. In addition, we also have a couple of incidents, one lane closure on segment 8 and a shoulder closure later on segment 3. Now, the idea here is that we model the effect of those compounded. So we adjust the capacity for both the rain event and the incident events together as if they were independent and apply those capacity adjustment factors, as you see here. Then, once we have generated the scenarios, and again, the 240 scenarios, each one scenario basically for a full day, which is another 96 time interval of 15 minutes each, we run each scenario in FreeVAL. It's run very quickly, and as a result, for each 15 minutes, we extract a travel time associated with that 15 minutes. And we take those 15-minute travel time and generate a travel time distribution, which is the graphic you see on the bottom right of the slide. It shows you basically what happened every 15 minutes for an entire year. Based on that, we could generate all kind of performance measure from the travel time distribution. So, people a lot of time focus on specific performance measure, but in reality, once you have the distribution, you can generate any travel time performance measure you want. Here is an example of a cumulative distribution function, which is basically shows you the 80 percentile, the 90 percentile. Typically, the way we express travel time is not a absolute travel time, but it's the travel time index, which is the ratio of facility travel time in any 15-minute period divided by the free flow travel time. One of the things that Federal Highway is looking for are what they call the level of travel time reliability, which is the ratio of the 80 to 50 percentile. These are examples of a variety of travel time measure. Here is the 80 and 50 percentile, and it gives you that measure of loader, if you will, in addition to all kind of performance measure you are interested in. FreeVAL will report all of these measures for you, and of course you can generate your own because it also gives you the entire distribution. So this is again a series of measures that are in the HCM and other measures that you can use, including certain things that are slightly unusual, like semi-standard deviation. This slide here shows, I think one would be very interested in seeing how the different component of non-recurring congestion affect travel time reliability. So I know this may not be very clear, but there are 4 different CDFs in this slide. The solid line to the far left is essentially the recurring congestion. This is the effect of demand variability over the year. And then we have a couple of middle curves that look at either incidents or weather effect. The dotted line here shows the combined effect of both demand, incident, and weather. And you can see, of course, if the demand, when the volumes are low, it doesn't really matter. It's when you have high demand that the effect of other non-recurring congestion could be very severe within the high percentile of the distribution. Okay, so I'm gonna again now hand it to Dr. Agdashi, who will show you a demonstration of reliability methods.
Thank you, Nagy. So in this section, I'm gonna continue my demo of FreeVAL, and I'm gonna show you how we can do this reliability whole year type of analysis that Dr. Rockwell just described. And before I start my demo, I'm gonna use the example that I just showed you in the previous session, I-540 westbound. And I'm gonna do a complete reliability analysis on top of that and talk about different MOEs and how this facility operates from reliability perspective. Then I'm gonna go ahead and model an incident management strategy. Will impact incidents and how they impact the operation of the facility, and show you how we can quantify the impact of strategy assessment from reliability perspective. So with that said, I want to move back to FreeVAL, and basically this was the place that we just left off. We did this core analysis, single day analysis, and what I'm going to do is that basically, if you can see on the top center of the screen, we have this reliability analysis section controller that we need to click on the generate, which invokes a window so that we can configure our scenarios and generate scenarios. So there are multiple tabs on this window that allows us to modify different things. The first one is called properties, and really what we can alter here is the start and end of our reliability reporting period, and which day within this reliability reporting period our single day analysis falls, if we want to include the relative demands fluctuation between days of the week and months in a year, and also adjust how many replication do we want to include. So I'm gonna keep everything as default. So 1 year RRP reliability reporting period, and move forward to the second tab, where here we define our demand fluctuation that happens between months in a year and days in a week. So as you can see here, we have a table with number ones there, and either we can collect local data from this facility or pick default values that we have both nationwide and in North Carolina, and pick it from there. So I'm going to go with US defaults, which are also cited in the HCM, and pull all those demand fluctuations, and you can see it in the top table that we have them all there. In the bottom section, we can exclude certain days from our reliability analysis. Days like 4th of July, Christmas Day, if they fall within weekdays, they're not really indicative of a typical day. So we may want to remove those specific days from our analysis, which I'm going to ignore it for now and move forward with my reliability scenario configuration. The third tab is called work zone, and really what this pertains to be is for modeling longer term work zones that impact the operation of this facility. Work zones that closes, let's say, shoulder or some lanes for a period of time, maybe weeks and months. We can come here and model them here. Then FreeVAL will use HCM models to model the impact of work zone on those scenarios that are impacted by this work zone. For the purpose of this example, I'm going to skip over modeling any work zone and continue to modeling incidents. So this tab basically enables us to model incidents in our reliability analysis. On top left, which is the main data entry section, and it shows some red background of cells, we need to tell FreeVAL what is the likelihood of seeing incidents in each study period for different months in a year. So we are talking specifically in this example between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. And what I'm going to assume here is that on average, we're going to see 2 incidents per hour study period in this example. Top right table shows HCM defaults in terms of how we are going to distribute all those incidents in terms of severity type. What are the durations distributed for each incident severity type. Bottom four tables tells what's the impact of incidents and capacity, speed, number of lanes closed, as well as demand. And all those numbers are coming as defaults from HCM, which we are going to employ them. But if any local data is available for any of the data that I discussed in this table, all these cells are overridable and user can go ahead and enter values there. So I've modeled all my incidents. I want to move to the last tab, which is called weather. And here, basically, we have to tell FreeVAL what are the likelihood of seeing different severe weather types. As you can see, they are listed in this table for different months in a year. So it seems to be a lot of data entry. But the good news is that there are two databases attached to FreeVAL where you can go ahead and invoke these weather probabilities from them. One is a national one, which includes about 100 airports, hit 100 big, large metropolitan area in the United States, as well as a finer database that has more airports within North Carolina. I'm gonna pick the national one and pick Raleigh, North Carolina for our analysis here. There you go. By picking Raleigh from this list, I need to make sure that I click on the extract values, and as you can see, those probabilities are collected. Of course, North Carolina maybe does not have interesting severe weather events that much. More than 90% of time is normal weather, but we are going to stick with that for the purpose of this example. So by clicking on the generate and run scenarios, basically FreeVAL will take all the information that we have provided and create all those scenarios basically that just Dr. Rockwell talked about, and models them by HCM day by day. And as you can see, we can see it on the left window in FreeVAL, that all those 240 scenarios representing 1 year worth of operation of this facility are made. And by clicking on these scenarios, we can take a look at, see what happens in terms of operation if we look at the heat map for each of these scenarios. For example, on this scenario that I just randomly clicked, this shows a very clear day. Even the demands are in a way that no recurring congestion is expected. This day we have two incidents that they're causing this type of queuing. This is another day. So we can look into these days one by one, but really the reliability method is meant to look into the overall impact of non-recurrent source of congestion across all the 240 scenarios. And for this purpose, we need to go back to the reliability analysis panel and click on the summary output. And by clicking on the summary output, we can see that on top, basically, it shows what are the configurations for the facility, what is my RRP start and end date, and then the second sort of section, it shows key reliability performance measures, including mean TTI, 50th percentile, ADS percentile, 95th percentile TTI, misery index, as well as semi-standard deviation, reliability rating, and percent vehicle mile travels that are occurring at TTI greater than 2. So these are all key reliability performance measures, and at the bottom it shows two distribution. One shows a probability distribution function of where all my TTIs, which are like normalized travel times, fall for all the 15 minutes that you can think of for a year worth of operation of our facility between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. On the right side, it shows a cumulative distribution that we can drive all those, for example, 80th percent and 95th percent travel times from that. So basically, this curve shows how my travel times are distributed. FreeVAL shows also other type of results as well as like a speed band, you know, how if you look into 1 year worth of operation of this facility, where my speeds are falling. As you can see, when we are getting close to 7 a.m., we see a longer band of operation that we may see some low speeds as low as 20s up until like maybe 65 and average as well. So here, this summary summary results window shows some other detailed information in terms of how my scenarios are operating in terms of, you know, how many incidents are modeled in each, what's the maximum TTI that is being observed. We can sort it by different, you know, characteristics of that each scenario has and go over them. Next tab shows how incidents are modeled based on HCM's method for scenario generation. As you can see, we have more incidents on segments 7 and 15, and that's because we have more vehicle mile travel. These are longer segments serving more vehicles. That's why most incidents are happening on segments 3, relatively 3, 7, and 15. Of course, we can take a look at weather and see how weather events are sort of distributed across different hours of the day and what type of weather categories there mostly are. As you can see, they're mostly low visibility and rain in North Carolina as opposed to severe cold and snow. So with that said, this shows one complete run of reliability analysis, creating scenarios looking at the overall performance measures, key reliability, MOEs. And what I'm going to do next is that I want to redo this reliability and implement incident management strategy and see how that affects reliability performance measures. But before doing that, I want to come back again to the summary results and pick a couple of MOEs. Let's say 95th percentile TTI, which is about 2.7, and 80th percentile, which is about 1.6. And the reason that I want to pick these two is that because incidents mostly impact the tail of our travel time distribution. So I'm going to pick these two, go back and hit generate. Basically, I want to redo the reliability analysis. And this time I'm going to keep everything the way that we have configured previously and come back here. And what I'm going to do is that I want to typically incident management strategy, they impact frequency as well as duration of each incident types. For the purpose of this example, I'm going to assume that it will cut my incidents into half in terms of frequency. So I'm going to put number 1 instead of 2 in terms of expected number of incidents that we are envisioning to see, and just hit again, create and run scenarios, and let FreeVAL rerun everything. And let's go to the summary of our basically reliability analysis. And as you can see here, our 95th percentile TTI, which was about 2.7, has decreased to 1.94. And 80th percentile from 1.6 has decreased to 1.56. So as you can see, the bigger decrease is in the 95th percentile TTI, and that was expected because really incidents, they impact the tail of our distribution. So with that said, I guess we are done with the demo of the reliability analysis in FreeVAL and how we can assess the impact of different strategies within reliability analysis. And I want to move toward our last session, which is session number 6. And I want to talk a little bit about model calibration. This was a section that we pretty much skipped over during our demo, but really there are important pieces left that the user needs to be cautious about. And that's the fact that we need to make sure that our model in FreeVAL is calibrated based on real world data. HCM6 has a procedure, a flow chart for how we can go after calibrating our facility. And basically it has 5 steps. 1, to gather all the information, free flow speeds, geometry, demand, data. And the first thing that it requires us to do is to calibrate free flow speed. That's the first step that needed to be done. Then by doing that, then we need to go ahead and look at our bottleneck and try to calibrate the capacity of our bottleneck via capacity adjustment factors to make sure that the queuing that we are getting is pretty much what we are anticipating. Then we need to also make sure that our demands are true representation of the actual demands on the facility. And this actually acts as a loop after validation. We may go through this process several times, make sure that things are run. So what this flowchart is proposing is to really change free flow speed adjustment factors, capacity adjustment factors, and demand adjustment factors to calibrate our facility. And the problem with these adjustment factors is that we have a lot of them. For each segment, each analysis period, we have an adjustment factor for all of this free flow speed, capacity, and demand. And sometimes really changing these becomes a time-consuming task. What FreeVAL has as a module helping users to do calibration is that it allows the user to upload target speeds that can acquire from different probe-based data sources, and basically tune all these adjustment factors per user's desire. If we want to go with free flow speed first, or we want to go with capacity second, and try to match what we are seeing in terms of speeds and queuing and the shape of queuing that is happening and the length of queue and stuff. Try to tune all these adjustment factors. So here I have an example trying to just show what I mean by really targeted speeds and what FreeVAL is giving me. So once we put all this geometric information, our AADT demands in FreeVAL, FreeVAL models everything in an uncalibrated basically situation. And that was what I did in my demo earlier in this webinar. And then, as you can see here, basically top graph shows an example of how that queuing it may look like for a facility that is not calibrated. And then in the bottom table, it shows what my targeted speeds should be. And typically, it's recommended that our targeted speeds are on average of a few days, that we are sure that we don't have any incidents or any other non-recurring congestion presented in the facility. And so as you can see here on this example, what FreeVAL wants to report as an uncalibrated sort of computation is pretty different than targeted speed. So we need to go through this calibration process in order to adjust our free flow speed and capacity adjustment factors so that we get something closer in terms of speeds reported to what we are seeing from targeted speeds. For the demos that I did earlier in this presentation, I already had compared those with what we are seeing from probe-based data sources. And for that specific facility, actually what FreeVAL shows as an uncalibrated sort of performance measures pretty much matches with what we see in the field. So that's why I skipped over the calibration procedure altogether. And then here in next two slides, I show that again, for another facility, what targeted speeds can look like, and what FreeVAL is basically is showing. And then we need to go through this free flow calibration first, and then capacity adjustment calibration second. These are two important pieces within calibration procedure in HCM, and trying to match the speeds that are reported. So with that said, I want to wrap up what we just discussed in session 6 and really go with any discussion.
Yes. Well, I hope you did find this presentation useful. The adjustment and improvement to FreeVAL continue. Dr. Agdashi mentioned a couple of things. Just to let you know, there is now a push to improve how we model the effect of incidents and weather. One question that lingers is whether multiplying capacity adjustment factor for weather and incident is appropriate, or some other function of those should be done. We also have just completed some research which shows that even those capacity adjustment factor are not static. They tend to vary over time, where when we did compare actually target speed, the best thing we could see was a lower initial CAF values at the start of the incident, and then a slight increase toward the conclusion of the incident. So this is something we'll also be looking at. And even more fundamentals are some of the methods in the HCM itself, primarily dealing with some of the weaving methods that are now being also looked at and possibly adjusted, and eventually finding their way into FreeVAL. So there's a number of improvements that are planned for the future, pending completing research and approval by the HCM committee. I don't know if we have provided emails.
At the beginning.
So at the very beginning, I think we had given you our email, either Dr. Agdashi or myself. Any question regarding this particular webinar, FreeVAL in general, and we just make sure that when you do pick up the FreeVAL and C version, that would be the one that we demonstrated today. So in conclusion, we thank you for your attention and look forward to hearing from you.